Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Sean Wilson. I head up the account team here at Crossfuze for Canada and the Eastern United States. I've been working with clients in the ServiceNow ecosystem for 6 years. Honored and lucky, frankly, to have Andrea Castillo with me. Andrea, thanks for joining, and maybe you could introduce yourself and explain your role.
Yeah, sure. So Andrea Castillo, I have the honor myself of being the practice director of the security and risk practice at Crossfuze. So my role is very exciting because I sort of have a dual role of working with customers that are interested in security and risk solutions, helping them build out roadmaps and putting together sort of projects for them. And then I also have the privilege of leading the delivery side of the project. So I have lots of great experience and stories from real life implementations. And prior to kind of joining Crossfuze, I was a platform owner for a large ServiceNow implementation. So I was able to roll out ITSM and GRC and SecOps. So.
I had forgotten about that. That's great. We're going to get your perspective, not just as a subject matter expert today, but also really as a platform owner, which I bet several folks in our audience can relate to. So glad to have you, Andrea, and thanks for joining. With that, I'll give you a quick overview of the discussion we're going to have today. The problem we're trying to solve ultimately is how do we thoughtfully expand ServiceNow within our organization? And is it ad hoc? Is it reactive based on demand that gets created? Or is there a better way to do it? A more thoughtful way that optimizes that investment, that value that you're getting. And that is what influences our agenda today. ServiceNow has a solution for this, and it's called the ServiceNow Center of Excellence and Innovation. I'm going to expose you to that today, but really this webinar is intended for folks who don't have that kind of internal support. While I would agree with my ServiceNow counterpart, ServiceNow Center of Excellence and Innovation is incredibly effective at this. I also think that the content from today's webinar in a lot of ways could be used to create a tailwind within our organization to not just thoughtfully expand the platform, but also perhaps build support for establishing your own ServiceNow Center of Excellence and Innovation. So we'll talk about that just briefly, and then we'll assume we don't have that level of support, and then we'll start solving the question of, so how do we expand the platform? Really, there's 3 different ways we've learned. One is scan for value, right? Be thoughtful at thinking about all the different capabilities and what those promises are. We're actually going to, I don't know if role play is the right word, but Andrea and I are going to have a conversation with each other that does exactly that, just to give you some real tangible example of what scanning for value could and should look like. And then once we've done that, once we've narrowed our focus, how do we take that focus and create interest, and the right kind of interest? And then really the final nail that gets it done for us is, how do we measure value around this proposed investment and expansion, right? So those 3 steps we're going to walk through in depth. At the end, we'll pull it all together, and as Bridget said, we'll take your questions. So again, that's really what to expect today. I talked about really kind of the goal and the solution, or at least ServiceNow's solution. I'll go a little more even abstract from the center of excellence. And it's really about developing a mindset, I think. It's about a ServiceNow first sort of mindset across the enterprise. As somebody, me and my team work with hundreds of customers every year, and we often like to share with our clients or prospects that we know what great looks like. When you've done 3,000 implementations, you know the right way to do it. I would also argue that we know what great looks like when it comes to this, right? Because that ServiceNow first mindset, the companies that have that and are constantly fielding requests for other point applications, but before approving those requests, thinking about how ServiceNow can handle that use case, they're the ones that wring every ounce of value out of the platform, whether it's automation to get rid of mundane work or simply just being able to provide visibility to everybody who needs it at the moment they need it. So that's really the big difference, is that mindset of ServiceNow first, and ultimately is how do we get there? Again, as I said, ServiceNow has an answer, and I'd agree with them. If you've not been exposed to this, I've only got 2 slides, I think, to talk about it, but they have ServiceNow has a wealth of information in the Customer Success Center online. It's available to everybody, customer or not. And in there, you can see things like how to set up a steering committee, how to set up a Center of Excellence and Innovation, and how to do road mapping, and how to right-size your internal team. These are all considerations, depending on where you are in your journey, right, that probably should be thoughtfully answered versus reactively answered. And that's really the core of the concept behind the Center of Excellence and Innovation. You know, and I promise the final slide here on this, but you know, when you think about their suggestions in how to create a Center of Excellence and what do they do, on this slide, we can start to see some elements that we can work through if a company doesn't have one of those, right? On the left, we can see roadmap oversight, value management. On the far right, we can see opportunity spotting, which sounds a lot like value scanning that I mentioned earlier. So if you think about the Center of Excellence and Innovation within your organization being a discipline, right, that helps you thoughtfully expand the platform, I agree. If you want to know more about it, contact your ServiceNow account team or Crossfuze. We're happy to work with you. But the simple truth is not everybody has that level of internal support. So now what? What if we don't have that? How do we do this? That's what we're going to talk about next. It's a 3-step process, right? Step 1 is, as I already touched on, evaluating the platform. But now let's look a little deeper, right? For each one of those areas of the platform, can we pull together, or do we have a full understanding of what the promise is that ServiceNow is making, right? What business problems are they solving specifically? And then the next question we should be thinking about is, what practical information should I know about? Is there a technical dependency? Should I do this after I have a CMDB or before, or doesn't it matter? Beyond that, is it a topic that lends itself more to being phased versus a big bang, right? An iterative approach, perhaps because of the degree of OCM, organizational change management, that's needed inside to fully adopt it. Those are the kinds of practical pieces of information that you're likely not to find on a data sheet, right? The data sheet's going to answer the first one. The practical experience would come from resources like the account team at Crossfuze, your account team at ServiceNow. But I'd even go farther and say things like the Snug, if you've gone to a ServiceNow user group and maybe made connections with colleagues. Another area that we see a lot of practical good information being shared, of course, is in the ServiceNow community forums and website. So, you know, of course, the theme that runs through today's presentation is we're here to help you do this, but we also think you can DIY this. And that's why I was bothering to point out some of those resources. And then lastly, somebody's going to ask you, how much does it cost and how much does it save? So understanding at least the napkin math of the financial impact up front. And when we think about that, we're thinking about a licensing investment, and we're also thinking about a professional services investment, because again, most folks have to do both if they're going to entertain platform expansion. So that's step 1. Once you've done that, and we're going to talk how to do that in just a second, I promise. But after we've kind of evaluated the platform through the lens of business value, practical information, and financial impact, we can go on to really building champions, right? We got to find and see and test for internal interest. So maybe we're talking to somebody in our same business unit, but that's the easy version. The more difficult version is if we need to broker these conversations outside of our business unit. I'm the director of IT. I need to talk to the director in HR, right? And maybe the only time we discuss something is when they're frustrated with onboarding, a problem perhaps. But that's the person I want to have this conversation with. And what we've learned, that there's a formula that makes that not be a sales pitch, and it's really providing compelling information, and really just only offering the next step. Step 3. Let's say we've gathered this information, we've clued in or brought in, we have a partner now, a champion. Obviously, we're going to have to go ask for money now and budget. So now it's time to put the numbers on the paper. What was napkin math in the beginning is now turning into an actual business case, or as we call it, business value assessment. Before I dig into step 1, Andrea, you said you were a platform owner, and I'm sure you were sort of tasked with expansion of the platform. Did this ring true even when you were in that seat?
Absolutely, yes. So I think that one of the things that we did kind of on the step 2, and I'd say step 3, is I was in a manufacturing company, so a big global one. So we had the benefit of having a kind of Lean Six Sigma team that we brought into these sort of discussions, and they would help us to do a lot of the real world analysis, like what are you spending on this business process today versus, if we could do some automation, if we could have that single system of action, what would we save? And then we would kind of define hard dollar value, efficiency, savings that we could bring to the organization. And then
Yeah, you broke up just a little bit, but we got everything but the last word or two of your sentence there. But thanks. Yeah, that's what I would have guessed. I would have guessed. It may not have been as formal a structure as this, but it sounds like it certainly feels right. So when we think about how do we scan the platform, how do we consider all the capabilities on the platform, and just generally how do we think about them? Because you see the map I have up on my screen now is kind of an eye chart, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff ServiceNow platform does, and we need to ensure that we kind of break it down into bite-sized bits. One of the things we've done here at Crossfuze, and we'd suggest you do the same, is rather than trying to boil the ocean, think about what are the most frequently implemented use cases. Be specific. What we did in our case is we went and talked to a bunch of our own existing customers and kind of pulled them for, after the big ITSM project that everybody does, what'd you guys do next? And we compiled all that information, and what you see bubbled up to the top is what you see on the screen. But remember, it's a little deeper than that. It's not simply organizing them into thoughtful, groups, advanced ITSM, IT related, service management, and other, but it's also gathering together some of those things we talked about, the 3 things, right? What's the business value or the promise? What's the practical experience around this? And then what's the sort of the general t-shirt size of the financial impact? So if you can imagine a conversation that we have with our customers, we're answering or we're reviewing all 3 of those pieces with each one of these 26 items. And invariably what happens, and I can tell you personally from leading those conversations, that we end up with 4 to 6 things that really feel like they're aligned with the customer's environment, right? It really sort of closes the loop, and there's almost an aha moment that, yeah, that's a real problem for us. And then, of course, we've started the process, and we've reduced that eye chart down to something much more manageable. So, as a way to help you do exactly this, we thought that Andrea and I could pick a couple of these use cases, and we'll use the ones that are within her domain of expertise. And we'll have that conversation, right, for just a couple of minutes, just to give you a sense of the kind of information you're looking for before you try to cross the chasm and go talk to your colleague in that other business unit. So, Andrea, is your internet good and stable?
I hope so. I switched to my backup network. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay.
So we're going to talk, we took two of those use cases and we mashed them together, right? So we took security incident response and vulnerability response, and we're going to, we know they're not the same thing, but they're close. And we're going to walk through some of this use case review the way we do it in step one right now. So Andrea, let me ask you the question. When we think about business value around SIR and VR, the problem that it's trying to solve, what is that promise that ServiceNow is making?
Yeah, so it's trying to solve a few kind of use cases. Um, the one that I think will resonate right now, especially being in the middle of a pandemic and seeing some of the things that we're seeing, is that it's trying to help customers to better handle the sheer volume of cyber attacks that they're experiencing at the moment. So you can see some of the metrics here on the slide, but they're reporting that the FBI is saying there's a 400% increase. Some of the endpoint security vendors are saying a 600% increase in phishing and malware attacks. And then we also know that ransomware attacks are increasing, so that customers are having to pay ransoms to kind of get their systems that are under attack back in their hands. So those are all really growing kind of exponentially, and our customers are struggling to keep up with the sheer volume and the exponential growth they're seeing. And where ServiceNow sort of sits is in a sweet spot where they're giving customers the system of action that they may lack. So we may have security teams that are looking at their own security tools, and then they may be swivel chairing and exporting data and asking IT to help them look into some of these security incidents or to fix some of these vulnerabilities. And it's not scalable. So our customers are needing the ability to sort of automatically ingest some of these security threats, automatically ingest some of the vulnerability reports that they've got, and assign it to IT and bring the teams together and be able to better scale up to handle the growth that they're seeing.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't think of this before, but it almost is like they didn't have a scalable solution in place, and then the pandemic hit and everything spiked. So
Yep.
really, what they need is scale. They need a way to get big quick, or use automation, to your point.
Yep. Yeah,
And
so Gardner is telling them, look, if you don't automate some of your more routine security work that you're doing, like phishing attacks are an example that we're seeing 600% increase. If you don't automate some of your malware that's coming towards you, and you're not going to be able to keep up with the growth that you're seeing, and you're going to have really skilled security people that we know are rare resources. There's a shortage of 2 million security people across North America at the moment. You're going to have those folks dealing with routine security incidents and never even getting to the work that they're trained to do and that they want to do. So ServiceNow is kind of playing where they're saying, hey, get this stuff in, get a system of action, get it working properly, and then start automating some of your top use cases. And that's exactly what we're working with a lot of our customers to do at the moment.
cool. All right. So there's the promise. Sounds like a pretty big promise, but it also sounds like a pretty big problem,
Yeah.
which is wholly appropriate. Let's talk about the practical information. What do you got to know, or what should you know, I guess, if you're going to head down this path?
Yeah, for sure. So ServiceNow, much like in the rest of the platform, they're kind of offering to be sort of a platform of platforms in the security space. So typically customers have 20 to 50, if you can believe it, point solutions that they have deployed in their security teams. And they all do different things and are valuable. So we're not saying, hey, bring in ServiceNow and get rid of your point security point solutions. We're saying make those solutions more effective by offering a single pane of glass. So you're going to see lots of integrations when you're deploying a security ServiceNow SecOps. You're going to integrate with your security incident event management solution, some of your threat intelligence solutions. In vulnerability, you're going to integrate with the vulnerability scanner. And so then when you've got all of those integrations happening, you've given your security analyst kind of a single pane of glass and sort of an operational center that they can work from, a workspace that they can use. It's very intuitive to them. It's going to have playbooks that are going to walk them through exactly what they need to do depending on, the type of incident that's coming at them. And so it's kind of helping that. And then the other, of course, very exciting thing is you're using the core data that's already there. You've mentioned CMDB a few times. You're using the asset configuration data that's already in your platform. You're using sort of the groups that are there in your platform. You can send off, integrations to change management when you need things, remediated. So you're taking advantage of sort of that core data that's already there.
That's great. Yeah, so when you talk about security in the sense of CMDB, it sounds like, is that a technical dependency? Do we need a good CMDB in place to start? Or let me start over. Let me re-ask the question. Is it a good bit of practical info to have your CMDB in as good a shape as possible before going down the SIR road?
It's true of all pieces of the platform. I look at the CMDB as sort of an engine. I'm not saying don't do security incident if you don't have a fully mature CMDB, because we don't find many customers that have a fully mature CMDB. It's a journey. I think it's a real opportunity, actually. So I mentioned how I was a platform owner previously, and when we worked on our CMDB, we didn't, at that point of my career, I was more on the IT service management side, but we didn't consider it an ITSM tool set. We considered it an enterprise tool. So the CMDB was built with stakeholders from various teams, including the security teams. So we kind of had the concept of having a security-oriented CMDB. So security team, what's the data you need to have in the CMDB to be able to do your job better? And so it's a great way for customers to sort of bring in security, who, let's face it, often might have some deeper pockets as well and some real ability to help you build out your CMDB. So it's a journey that you can do in parallel.
Great. So what I heard there is we're going to leverage the data that's already in the system. We can potentially use this as energy to move forward with making the CMDB even better than it is today. And on top of delivering that business value that we heard about earlier, right? So I guess that was the takeaway for our audience, is that if we only think about business value through the lens of it's going to help me scale, okay, that's true. But not only is it going to help you scale, right? The practical information is we know your CMDB is going to get better in this whole process, which that, of course, touches 17 different applications on the platform. So suddenly the business value is quantifiable even outside this area. So
Absolutely.
let's move to the third one then, which is the financial impact. And I want to take the easy one. When we think about financial impact, obviously we're talking about the investment, probably in licensing and probably in professional services. And then on the other side of the equation, we're talking about what's the benefit? What are we saving? What are we preventing? What are we gaining? So I'll take the easy side, the cost side. At this point in our process, step one, really, we just need that t-shirt size, right? That small, medium, and large. So I'll give you that. From a licensing perspective and from a professional services perspective, both of these are probably going to be pretty similar to the ITSM, right? So if you've got IT licensing for your folks and you've done an ITSM phase one project, I've seen security be around the same kind of licensing charge and around the same kind of professional services charge. So we'll call it a medium investment. What about the other side of the equation, Andrea? What's the rough take on financial impact?
Yeah, so I think on the slide here, we have some information on sort of cost avoidance. I can also touch a little bit on maybe potential cost savings, but let's start with cost avoidance. So there's data breaches. They hit the news. We all see them. The average right now in the industry accepted cost of a data breach is $3.86 million. For a large company, it could be $150 million. Let's talk the Equifax. I think a lot of people remember a couple years ago, the credit bureau had a large breach, which was due to an unpatched server, as unsophisticated as that. And that breach has ended up costing them $575 million. So the cost avoidance is a big driver here of let's get our security hygiene, our security posture improved so we avoid these sort of issues. Obviously, GDPR is another sort of regulatory. If you have a data breach of European citizen data, it could cost you up to 4% of your revenue. So you have to show due diligence as a board, as an executive. Bringing in ServiceNow and improving these processes is definitely showing due diligence and will help. The other kind of cost savings piece that I think we could mention is that the automation we talked about. So if we can automate, let's say, a phishing response to phishing attacks, we have a customer right now we're working with that has 24,000 phishing attacks annually. That was last year. It's probably a lot more this year. So we could actually run, ServiceNow has the ability that once you orchestrate and automate, which is what we're doing, that process, you can actually run an ROI calculator. So, hey, it would take us this long to respond to a phishing attack before. It would take this much time of a security analyst. We're freeing up that time. So you could actually run that and literally get hard dollar savings out of these projects.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, for our audience then, to tie a bow around this little use case review that you saw, we've got one more, but let me still wrap it up here. You can, if I'm in your mind, I'm the platform owner inside of an enterprise, and I want to thoughtfully expand, right? The information I now have at my fingertips to talk to my colleague on the security side is that, ServiceNow is a great tool set for helping you guys scale up. In fact, one of its core features really is automation, the world-class automation platform. And people all over the world are using it to address the same problems you're dealing with. Maybe in this case, the practical information I would sprinkle in there would be, hey, we're not even saying replace your special security point applications. Maybe they can even work together. And the other good news is my CMDB would be brought along for the ride and enhanced and improved to serve you. So those are some of the value pieces. And we'll talk about how to build a champion in just a bit. But I think we'd all have to agree that that's a lot of good actionable intel, and really is the baseline for building a champion. So we'll do one more, and of course we're lucky to have Andrea, so we're going to stay in her domain of expertise. So Andrea, what is the business value or the promise ServiceNow makes around integrated risk management, formerly known as GRC, which is how I remember it? What's the business value?
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about really the last use case kind of bleeds almost over into integrated risk management. Cyber risk is just one example of a risk, but we know our customers have a lot of other types of risk as well. Operational risk is getting a huge look in right now with the global pandemic and some of the other things we're seeing right now. So that's kind of one. And really, risk and compliance management is a discretionary activity for our customers. They all need to do it to greater or lesser degrees. I mean, examples are we've got PCI. If you can't pass a PCI audit, you can't process credit cards. HIPAA, you need to be able to comply with that to actually offer medical services. Sarbanes-Oxley to be a publicly traded company. So our customers really have big needs in this space, and we know that at probably around 95% of them, according to ServiceNow, don't have a tool right now to do this work. So countless hours being spent on kind of across the organization in all different areas of the organization, kind of trying to gather up data to see how compliant they are with the requirements and doing it via spreadsheets and emails. And again, just like the last use case we were talking about, it's not scalable. There's a lot of new regulations coming, and customers are struggling to actually meet their regulatory requirements at the moment.
Got it. And if we switch gears into thinking about any sort of practical advice, whether that's about doing things in an iterative or phased approach, or maybe it's about, again, back to the CMDB, maybe there's some technical dependencies that you should have in place. Anything come into mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think ultimately, this is almost like a story that organizations need to be able to tell to their boards, to their executives, all across their organizations. And when you look at it, it all needs to be kind of quantified in risk. So boards want to say, hey, here's the risks that you have in your organization, and here's sort of what you need to spend to compensate for the risk. So for example, if you just look at 2020, it's been a year where I think a lot of things that maybe risk in the past was more of a academic exercise in a lot of organizations. We actually saw it happen in real time. So fires at data centers, a risk that people talk about, we've seen a lot of, increase in fires and activity that could damage businesses. We've seen protests that could threaten businesses. We've seen a global pandemic, a huge increase in cybersecurity threats, and then digital risk is something that's actually the #1 board level concern across the globe at the moment, because we have companies that really, really quickly pivoted away from working from behind a firewall in an office to working from home. So that's a huge amount of risk that's been introduced to a lot of organizations. And so companies are realizing that they didn't understand their risk posture maybe accurately before. They don't understand the compensating controls and how they tie to those risks, how they're managing risk. They don't understand necessarily, another good point is business continuity management plans. So I wonder how many organizations kind of turn to their legacy business continuity, maybe word-based plans, and went, oh, it's not adequate when we actually rubber hits the road, we have a global pandemic. We didn't really plan for that appropriately. So I think all of that are things that people are realizing that they need to get in place and quickly. From a practical perspective, CMDB, our friend, plays a key role here as well. Just having that sort of core data available to risk managers, to compliance managers, when they start seeing what ServiceNow can do because of the vast amount of really important data already on the platform, it's a game changer for them. And you can do things with the CMDB, like I mentioned PCI previously. If you can go into your CMDB and identify what is in your cardholder data environment, that's what a PCI audit is looking at, you've shortcutted a huge part of your PCI audit engagements, which is scoping it. So it can help you with that. If you can put into your CMDB, you've got personally identifiable information on this server, super powerful. That'll help you with so many different sort of compliance activities that you need to do to manage PII data in your organization. So again, your CMDB is part of the journey in implementing these solutions.
Yeah, you journey you said a couple times. I don't want to get this wrong, but when you say journey, are we also talking a phased approach for this kind of work?
We absolutely are. So these projects can fail, in that if you try to go, hey, we're going to transform the way we do this across the entire company all at once. So absolutely, we at Crossfuze, we help our customers. So I've mentioned that they don't have a legacy tool in most cases. They don't have a legacy sort of integrated process in most cases, and they don't know where to start in a lot of cases. They haven't had a tool before. So we go in and say, hey, it makes sense. In 3 months, you can do this to get get your policies in ServiceNow, get your, let's look at a few authority documents and get those in, things like Sarbanes-Oxley, things like ISO, things like NIST, get those in for phase 1 and get folks sort of attesting that control is in place or creating issues. So that's kind of where we'd say that's what a phase 1 could look like. And then maybe layer on some risk in the next phase and layer on some audit functionality in the next phase. So we definitely help the customers through that journey.
Got it. Cool. Okay, well then that leaves us to talk about some money. I'll take the easy one again, which is the licensing and the professional services, and I would also call them medium impact on both sides. And my reference that we should all have in common is, what does that ITSM spend for licensing and professional services look like? Generally, I think IRM is in that same ballpark. But obviously non-compliance with these regulations, Andrea, are a big part of the financial impact. Is there more to it than just that?
Yeah, so again, it's a lot of cost avoidance issues, showing due diligence, all of that good stuff, and really, it's mandatory. Customers have to comply with this. So, bringing in those ServiceNow is actually a huge efficiency play in this case. So if customers start thinking about the amount of time that they spend in just gathering data for different kind of pieces of compliance, if they look at how much time they spend on audit or reporting up to boards, and really even after the thousands of hours that they're probably spending, nobody could ever claim that they've got a true real-time risk posture sort of snapshot. So it's dispersed across the organization, and it's thousands of hours. So I've kind of mentioned that I was a platform owner and have a real world kind of use case where, you know what, instead of running 3 separate audits to comply with 3 separate sort of authority frameworks and documents, let's do it once, because we know there's a lot of overlap between these different frameworks. So you might have, one team that's responsible for PCI and one that's responsible for SOX, and one that let's bring them together. And that's the whole concept behind integrated risk management. So real savings in gathering up this data and reporting it in ways that make sense to the organizations.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, so to our audience, that was an example of the kinds of thoughtful commentary that we think is step one, right? Let's look at those 25 or 26 top use cases, pull together the business value promise, important practical tidbits, and what the financial impact could be, and then make a decision. Now that I know those things, is IRM something that should be on our short list? Again, your ServiceNow account team, I'm sure, is wanting to help you with that process. I know my team is happy to help with that process. And then earlier we talked about some sourcing of where you could get some of that information. Today you kind of saw the pro level because we actually had our practice lead help us with it. But in any case, hopefully that concept comes across. So really, that's the kind of conversation or data that you need to bring together to think about what is the short list, right? And now that we have that short list, how do we weaponize it? What do we do with it? And again, there's a couple of steps here. The first is don't shortcut the last 2 slides. The first step is explicitly understand and be able to communicate the business problems that ServiceNow is trying to solve. Right? You need to know that because you need to meet your potential colleague where they sit. We want to talk to them about Sarbanes-Oxley compliance and the idea of getting efficiencies by bringing both them and the PCI team together that Andrea just talked about, right? We need to know those things. Probably a good idea to pull together a couple of assets and artifacts. We find the thing that works the best here is a short interest creating video. I'm shooting for 4 or 5 minutes tops. This should be, great sources for this. If you're trying to look for it, is the ServiceNow YouTube channel. I'd get a plug in there for the Crossfuze YouTube channel. But there's plenty of places you can find a short video on IRM in ServiceNow, or advanced orchestration or integration hub in ServiceNow. Whatever the topic is, you'll be able to put your hands on those artifacts. And then decide what's going to be your ask, right? Like if I go find somebody who's interested, I think I want to show them what great looks like in the platform beyond just this 4 or 5 minute demo. So who's going to help me do that? Your choices, again, are you can do it internally, although generally I think a better curated demo by the pros is what you want. But I do know folks that do their own internal demos. Your partner or Crossfuze, we're happy to provide that for you. And of course, your ServiceNow account team, also happy to provide what great looks like around something. So now that you've got your assets in line, you've got to decide on your approach. How are you going to do it? Are you going to do it one-on-one? Are you going to do it or ask a surrogate to? Maybe a combination of both. Speaking for us, and I'll stick out my neck and speak for ServiceNow as well. We're happy to act as your surrogate if you want to make an intro. This is the kind of conversation that myself and my team would be having. It isn't about, do you want to buy ServiceNow? It's about, these are the business problems ServiceNow is solving. Here's a quick video. Would you like to learn more? But whether we do it or you do it, the next step is to go and help and go and execute. And you can see, frankly, step 3 there is really just a recap of what I talked about. The one thing I would add is that, it's always good to explain the concept of the BVA, the business value assessment. So we're not asking them to hop in the boat and sail across the ocean. We're just asking them to step in and get their toes wet. Right, they're going to have plenty of time to hop out after seeing the demo, perhaps after scoping, perhaps, and finally after measuring the business value. The third one is that part I just mentioned, which is establishing business value. How do we measure that? Well, now we've secured a champion in a related department, perhaps. They've maybe consumed the content and they want to learn more. They've looked at the demo and they're on board. How do we get that financially focused document put together that's going to measure the exact non-t-shirt size for licensing and professional services and compare it to, some of the numbers is an example that Andrea was talking about, not just around cost deflection, but around, in her case, there was a lot around efficiencies, right? In gaining capacity to do other, perhaps more strategic things rather than the mundane. So we've built a lot of business cases over time. ServiceNow now shares some of their tool set with us as an elite partner. So both of us have access to a very compelling platform that is really just puts out I think a document that's above reproach. I've not shared it with a CFO that wasn't thoroughly impressed. But we learned a couple things to get there. So the first is we need to use your real information, right? I mean, yeah, we can go to Gartner and Forrester and get an average cost per ticket at the service desk if you want us to, but your BVA will be much more compelling if you provide that information. So whether you're leveraging us or doing it on your own, put as much real metrics in that. We find that it really connects with decision makers if those metrics are your own. And the second one, this is probably should have been number 1. This is the biggest mistake we see, which is people get too overly optimistic in their calculations. We're going to have a 30% savings. And while that may be true, we probably want to ask for budget and quantify the value with a smaller number than 30%. We want a realistic number for sure. But if you've ever been the guy that showed up with a business case that said 500% ROI in the first 2 months, you'll know you get laughed out of the room. Also be careful to quantify those hard costs, hard returns versus soft cost and soft returns. I think that financial, budget generally comes from hard costs and hard returns, but I think some of those other soft things can really be added and beneficial to pushing over the edge. Anybody who's been in IT and set up an ITS, a portal for customers to go and engage with us knows that the number of self-service visits, maybe where they leverage the knowledge article, I can measure that and I can give you that data. What I don't know, or which is more difficult to measure, is how did I improve the experience of the end user? I certainly did. I just don't know exactly what that's worth. And that would be an example of that soft cost. Everybody wants the end user's experience to be better, but nobody really puts a dollar amount on it. Still important to include. Andrea, and put you on the spot here, when you were the platform owner and you were talking about, you had I think it was a Six Sigma team of people that were building business cases. Do these things ring true in your ears?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that yeah, I think that the best part about, I think, involving those kind of folks as well that we saw was that we actually measured afterwards to see if, because sometimes that's forgotten. We built these great optimistic cases and we say, this is what we're going to save the organization. They could actually measure and say, yeah, we did save this many hours. And that's where it's incredibly powerful to unlock further investment. So if you can go back to your CFO or whoever's funding you and say, hey, last time we did this, we came to you with this and we actually realized this, it makes it really simple to get further projects and further investments kicked off. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Well, here's just an example of some of the just a quick screenshot to give you a sense of what that business value assessment is that you may need, that again the Crossfuze account team is happy to pull together for you. Talking about putting it together, as we go back to the beginning of the call, right? The intent of today's content was to help the platform owner who wanted to thoughtfully expand, wasn't sure how to, and didn't have the benefit of that center of excellence. And when you think about going through that 3-step process, whether it's on your own, whether ServiceNow is helping you, or whether Crossfuze is helping you, the kinds of artifacts you're going to have coming out of that are going to be something like this. There'll probably even be some sort of roadmap where things are plotted out by quarter or by month. And then you've already seen that BVA that we talked about, right? That sample I showed you. So if you think about how powerful those 3 documents would be in making your case, obtaining budget, and really bringing the organization along, I would bet it's significantly more powerful than how you're trying to do it today. And I'm from experience, I can tell you I've seen it work over and over and over and over again. The pro tip at this level is, how do we also say this discipline that has worked internally is really just a subset of what the center of excellence and innovation is. So maybe you could actually get some get some support for setting that up in the future. Okay, well, you hung in there this long. I appreciate it. We have gotten to the end of the prepared content. We'll take some questions if we have any in just a sec. I'll just underscore the offer that we've said a few different times. I know on behalf of your ServiceNow account team, and certainly on behalf of the Crossfuze account team, you don't have to do this alone. We've done it a bunch of times, and we're here to help. We'd love to earn your business, and this is the type of work we'd like to do to earn that business. So if you're interested in that, let's talk at crossfuze.com. We'll get routed to me, and we'll get the right account rep working with you on anything we talked about today. And with that, Bridget, let's if we got any questions, let's dig in.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. A couple coming through. The first one here is, what is the best place to start when looking at using ServiceNow to support risk and security programs?
That's got to be you, Andrea. I don't know that one.
Okay. It'd be interesting if you did it, but we will. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of different sort of entry points. So it's probably the same answer you give on any sort of use case you're building, is just to figure out what the business outcomes you're trying to achieve are, and where the pain points are in the organization. So, if a customer says to me, "Hey, we're trying to get ISO 27001 certified," that helps a lot. We can give them a journey from there. Okay, this is kind of what you do, or we're trying to comply with CIS 20. We hear that kind of thing, or we're having trouble passing PCI audits, or our security analysts are struggling to keep up. So those are the sort of conversations we like to have with customers, and then we will give them a sort of roadmap of how, usually in like a 3-month sort of, do this for the first 3 months, then we recommend you do this for the next 3 months to get them where they want to go. So there's a lot of different sort of entry points depending on what they're.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always think about that old phrase we kind of use, which is it's important to know where we're going because we're going to make decisions now that are going to impact choices in the future. And it kind of sounds like that's my simplified version of your very good answer. Anything else, Bridget?
Yeah, another one is ServiceNow is sometimes considered an IT tool, which can make it off-putting to other business units. What's the best way to solve this?
That's a good question. Um, it's true too. I would agree. So I think the best way to solve it is to inform kind of a bit about the ServiceNow story. So maybe bookends, right? One is where they came from and what they were trying to do. And then another way would be kind of today, how we see it being used. And you heard a little bit about that earlier. So let's go back to where they started. ServiceNow never intended to be an IT tool. They intended to be a world-class get work done tool. Really, that's it. They knew they had to build an automation. They knew that every business unit inside the enterprise had work to get done. It was being done inefficiently, and they thought they could solve that problem. As it turned out, they got adoption early on from IT, and that's obviously how they sometimes got that moniker. But they were not a purpose-built IT tool. They were a purpose-built move work around efficiently and provide visibility tool. Or as their CEO likes to say, they're the workflow company. And they really are. So it's helpful, I think, when you remind that bit of the story to, let's say, an HR leader. Like, it's not about how to use the IT tool, it's how to get your work done efficiently. So that was the one of the two statements, and then the other bookend really was what Andrea was talking about earlier, this notion of system of engagement or system of action and system of record of truth, I guess, source of truth, perhaps. So you could have a point application that is perhaps harvesting a bunch of information, but then it's moving into ServiceNow, perhaps being further curated and considered with other information and data streams, and then action is being taken within ServiceNow, right? It's kind of the platform of platform story, which everything I just said had nothing to do with IT, right? It could have been HR, it could have been facilities, it could have been any business unit. So I think a bit about their origin story, and then maybe talking a bit about relieving the pressure about, we're not trying to necessarily replace your favorite point application. I think we're almost at the top of the hour. Bridget, do we have any more?
Yeah, I'll throw one more your way here. It says, where are customers seeing ROI on investing in ServiceNow GRC and SecOps products?
Where are they seeing ROI? Andrea, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, I think we did touch on that throughout the presentation. So it really is just to kind of state it as they're seeing cost avoidance through avoiding fines and from not complying with regulatory requirements or not having data breaches, just getting their basic security hygiene in order so that they can help with those sort of cost avoidance, showing due diligence. So those are all real. And then the efficiency play that we talked about a few times. So just the sheer massive volume of data that is required to be reported and required to be gathered up, and all of the efficiency of sort of automating some of that data collection and helping scale up for organizations. So there's a lot of hours of real savings of work that can be avoided through implementing a system of action around security and compliance.
Great answer. Much better than the one I was going to give. But with that, we're going to wrap up for today. We certainly appreciate you attending. I know Bridget mentioned earlier that it's going to be available. The recording will be available. Let's talk at crossfuze.com if you want some more help from my team. And with that, we'll say goodbye and hope everybody has a great afternoon. Take care.